Well, after being accused of hoarding vaccines and blocking the export of some crucial raw materials needed to produce vaccine doses, there is a chorus now within the Biden administration that seems to be growing to offer help and much needed support to India right now, given the fact that we are in the middle of the worst pandemic ever. Here's more.
After widespread outrage over Biden administration denying India raw materials to make COVID vaccines, United States has pledged help. The two high-ranking officials in the Biden administration issued statements expressing concerns over COVID crisis in India and vowed support. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and White House National Security Advisor Jack Sullivan assured that additional supplies and support is being worked out.
U.S. Chambers of Commerce, which partners with USIBC, has already demanded that U.S. provide AstraZeneca vaccine to India and make it an urgent, look into the urgent request of India. So right now, finally, after all the requests that have been put in and demands from various quarters, U.S. is now looking at providing supplies to India.
The recent statement of support from the United States comes amid heat on Biden administration from several quarters for not releasing the surplus COVID-19 vaccine to India. United States is believed to be sitting on a pile of over 30 crore unused COVID jabs. On Sunday, Indian-American Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy called on the Biden administration to release stockpile of unused doses of AstraZeneca vaccine to worst-hit countries, including India. The Biden-Harris administration adopted a strident US-first approach. Despite Kamala Harris flaunting on Indian roots,
another woman whose shoulders I stand on, and that's my mother, Shamala Gopalan Harris. At the University of California, Berkeley, she met my father, Donald Harris, who had come from Jamaica to study economics. They fell in love in that most American way while marching together for justice in the civil rights movement of the 1960s.
Even referring to her chittis or aunts in India.
Family is my uncles, my aunts, and my chittis.
While Harris's move in the run-up to her election was aimed at wooing the Indian-American voters, Washington snubbed India's request to lift a ban on export of vaccine raw material. US earlier defended its decision, saying its first obligation was to take care of the requirements of American people. Many have contrasted the United States playing selfish to India, supplying hydroxychloroquine pills when United States needed them the most. While the recent statements do signal a shift in stance, any concrete support from the United States can be a major diplomatic coup for the Modi government. Bureau Report, India Today.
Situation there. Our Foreign Affairs Editor Geeta Mohan is getting us more details on that big story. Geeta, we know that India has been extremely uncomfortable when it comes to America also holding back raw materials, something that India has spoken about. India tried to raise at several forums, and Adar Poonawalla, we all know, also tweeted about it, saying that we need these raw materials at this point in time. What is India going to do now further to build some pressure on America, as it also looks at tapping some of these resources from other countries like the EU, for example, Geeta?
Sneha, on the 22nd of April, the statement that came from Ned Price, spokesperson of the State Department, where he said America first and Americans first, and by vaccinating all Americans, they're doing the world a favor. It really did not go down well with India. India has been engaging the US administration, and finally we're seeing the toning down of the kind of stance that US had taken. Secretary Blinken, as also National Security Advisor Sullivan, both tweeting today that they're looking at ramping up supplies. Now, when it comes to supplies, they still have not specified, and have been trying to ask the US administration officials as also the Indian administration officials what those supplies really are. Are they oxygen related or vaccine related? There is no clarity on that front. In all probability, what we are looking at right now could very well be oxygen related and not vaccine related, which means that the US continues to dig in its heels while India awaits raw materials to be imported from countries such as the United States of America to ramp up vaccine production in India. And it is very unfortunate, Sneha, because when they needed help, India really went out of its way, lifted the export ban on hydroxychloroquine and ensured that the then Trump administration gets what is needed. In terms of a comparison between whether if Trump would have been better for India than Biden, well, Trump was more nationalistic and fiercely nationalistic than Biden. And certainly when it comes to exporting of vaccines, in all probability, Donald Trump also would not really have paid heed to or agreed to India's request.
Yes, absolutely. I remember the Modi government even faced flag when, in spite of the ban on exports, decided to give hydroxychloroquine to America. There were questions raised then, but we did it out of a goodwill gesture, Geeta. Thanks so much for getting us your perspective on that important story. I'm also being joined now by Mr. K.C. Singh, is the former Secretary of the MEA, Government of India, and Dr. Sundar Chaulia, he's the author, and he's an author and also foreign affairs expert. Thank you both for your time here. Mr. K.C. Singh, I want to begin by asking you, sir, what do you make of this now? There was a time when everybody was in a bit of a crisis there. Now America is in a position to do much more for India, looking at a situation, but they aren't really coming forward. What's going on?
Look, I don't think we should see it as a black and white issue. Essentially, when we were sending them the medicines, we didn't really have that. Pandemic hadn't really affected us that badly at that stage. And you must remember that Biden came in when Trump left the nation completely ravaged by the disease. So he came in promising that he's going to vaccinate everyone, he's going to roll it back, he's going to do things that Trump had not done. So he invoked the Defense Production Act within 2 weeks of taking over on 5th of February. Now, this is an old act. This is not a new act.
Yes.
But under the act, then everything gets controlled by the US government. No pharmaceutical company can send out either vaccines or materials required to produce the vaccines. I think in our case, the problem was not so much vaccines, because in any case, AstraZeneca is not even approved in America. I'll come to that issue later, that why are they sitting on it then if they haven't approved it? But I think what we need is, and that is what the Serum Institute has been saying, are raw materials, are filters and things you need to step up the capability from what the Serum Institute is doing now, which is about 2 million doses a day, to take it up to 3 or 4 million.
Yes.
Of course, there was a delay on the Indian part also because the government of India took their own time giving him the additional money, which we have given now. So I think it's a question of working with the Americans, explaining to them. But let me add one more point. If you look at today's New York Times, there is an editorial there which has said that US has to take certain steps. And there is no such thing as US facing pandemic, because the pandemic will mutate and come back to US. And that is what has happened. Because both the mutant, the double mutant to some extent, and the British one, which is called B1.1.7,
Yes.
is ravaging Michigan. And what is affecting them is that it's much younger people who are getting affected. In the first wave, it was the older people. And only 1/3 of Americans are vaccinated so far. So they have 2/3 of the Americans left. So from America's point of view, they really don't know. They're also flying blind how effective these vaccines will be. They may have to switch the vaccines. You may have to go to a third dose. So I think without getting agitated, some of probably the public statements made by their senior people were completely avoidable. These are things which are settled in closed rooms.
Yes.
And there we address each other's concerns, because once you get to vaccine nationalism, then really every country is going to behave like that. And look at today's Global Times, they're gloating over it, the Chinese, saying, look, your strategic partners and your Quad, see what they're doing to you, you should come to us.
Yes,
So
was
I think
coming to that.
US should have
Yes.
understood this.
Yes, you know, Dr. Sriram Sundar, I want to ask you, even in the Quad, when questions were asked of India, whether they're going to raise this issue in the Quad or not, though this matter was touched upon, is what, you know, I've been given to understand. But India did say that this is a bilateral issue and it is something that's going to get sorted. My sense is that we played this down until the time somebody like an Adar Poonawalla actually had to tag POTUS and tweet about this, saying that, look, we need the raw materials. You just can't do this to us. We as a country have, you know, just given out so many doses, 67 million doses of the vaccine to our neighboring countries and to other countries who need it. Why is that America has not been able to act on any pressure from India, or have we not exercised enough pressure, in your opinion?
I think, Sneha, we are leaving no stone unturned in getting them to lift that embargo. I think the issue is with the domestic politics and the corporate power in America. You see, the American manufacturers, the big vaccine manufacturers, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer, you know, they want, captive raw material stock available for them to ramp up their own production, which they are now exporting worldwide for profit. So they, in a way, are competitors with our Serum Institute and with Bharat Biotech and Biological E.
Yes.
So they have been applying pressure. You see, Biden, for all the talk about liberalism and multilateralism and cooperation with the rest of the world, there are limitations to how far he can go against the big pharma. So that's the first point. The second thing is, there is also a lot of domestic, backlash against being generous to the world. In a way, Biden is continuing the Trump playbook on many parameters. Mm-hmm. So even on climate change, for example, he has convened a summit and announced emission cuts for the US and tried to bring US back into the picture. But then their commitment to climate finance, for example, for developing countries, we remain disappointed by Biden. So the point is, they will disappoint us, especially when it comes to these issues, because corporate America calls the shots. That's the first. And secondly, I think they are also looking to negotiate with us on various issues. And great powers always do this, even with their closest allies. For that matter, the US has not exported a single dose of vaccine to anybody.
Yes.
You are just mentioning, Sneha, how many countries we have done. In the EU has been better. The European Union has been better than the US on this front.
Yes.
So among the big manufacturers, countries with a huge stockpile, the US has been, it's not just Trump. In the last 3 months since Biden has been powered, they're continuing that. That's because there are tremendous pressure domestically. Like Ambassador K.C. Singh is saying, they're also fearful and afraid that the public will say, why are we being so generous to the rest of the world? We have, almost 600,000 deaths, 6 lakh people already dead in the US. And, we should not care for being overly generous to other countries. We should take care of our own needs. But it's not our own needs. You look at the statistics, Sneha. Already they have vaccinated 27% of their population. It's far ahead than India or most countries as a percentage of population.
Yes.
Biden administration is on target to vaccinate all their people. Yet they are saying Americans first. So actually, it's a ruse. One has to look beneath the fine print and see what is going on. It's actually big pharma and corporate profits. And as usual, be it a liberal or a conservative in power, they bow to those interests. So I think this is a bigger issue. And just to add to that, at the WTO, India and South Africa have been asking for many months that remove the IPR, the intellectual property right protections, and waive them so that we can produce the generics of Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson & Johnson. They have refused. The US has refused. So when it comes to business, America is not liberal. America is cutthroat, and we have to accept that. And we have to live with it, and we have to negotiate better with them.
Yes,
I'm sure
talking
that
about Pfizer,
it's delayed but not blocked forever.
Yes, Pfizer refused to have a conversation beyond a point with the drug regulators in India because India said, let's do bridging studies here, and then you get the approval. That is one basic condition that Pfizer never really approved to. It packed its bags and left India saying we're not going to be dealing with India, and look at what has happened right now. India is trying to have a conversation with Pfizer and other companies once again. But has this policy really of us wanting to vaccinate people outside of India, giving doses as a goodwill gesture, as a grant in aid, cost us is also the other question. Be with us, gentlemen. I'll just come back to you both in a bit from now. Meanwhile, let's just listen into Alexander Slater, the US-India Business Council Deputy MD in India, and his point of view on these developments.
Working with our parent organization, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, last week we called upon the U.S. government to release excess AstraZeneca vaccines to India and other countries confronting high COVID case counts. Over the past 48 hours, senior officials in the White House and U.S. health authorities, as well as the Secretary of State, have publicly stated their awareness of the situation here, expressed their sympathies and their willingness to help. This week, I expect you will see these expressions of support translate into concrete action, both from the U.S. government and the U.S. business community.
You know, Mr. K.C. Singh, I want to come to you since you spoke about AstraZeneca first. Leave alone Pfizer or even the raw material issue for a second. AstraZeneca is a vaccine that has got the, that has got emergency use authorization in India. What then is the problem of sharing these doses with a country that needs it the most right now?
Well, it's just, as I said, the Defense Production Act, which the US president, in fact, one of the waivers they have is the waiver they used with Canada and Mexico, which is to say it's a loan. We are not giving it. And by the time that Serum Institute steps up their capability, we can return it if the Americans want, or give it to a third country, to whichever they want to assign it. So it's a question of sitting down and explaining to them. But as I said, their concern at the moment may be, and probably we were not mindful of that concern when we exported, that we just took it for granted there's not going to be a second wave.
Yes.
They are concerned about mutating virus. What if Pfizer and Moderna are not effective against a mutated virus? And you suddenly find that AstraZeneca is. You see, then they don't want an uproar in America at that stage, saying, why did you send them out? But certainly they can give it on loan. And that is what they should do. And they're sitting on probably 300 million extra doses. As it is globally, the developed countries have 1/6 of the world's population, 16%, and they booked half the world's vaccines. Now, where is the justice in this? It's
Yes.
really not a very fair arrangement. And you've got the whole of Africa without a vaccine producer, unable to supply anything, Latin America with very poor vaccine production capability. So what is happening to India is that unless we quickly overcome the spike here, the second wave, we can't be the global supplier that the rest of the world was expecting us to be.
Yes, we can't.
And that is the second thing. And third is a mutated variant may go back to America and hit them. So they can't be hiding from it, because sooner or later, this variant will travel back.
Well, absolutely. You know, right now, Dr. Sriram Sundar, India's strategy is that, we can't go for a nationwide lockdown. Let's just get our vaccinations in place. Let's vaccinate as many people as it can. These are vaccines. They have a shelf life. Mr. K.C. Singh did point out that why can't we then, loan these vaccines from America? But India is also looking at other things. For example, oxygen units that it is looking at the EU for. India is turning to its other partners. What will all of this also do to the bilateral relations between India and US in the days and weeks to come?
Well, Sneha, they're saying that the friend in need is a friend indeed. So I think even if this is delayed, eventually they will release the raw materials. But the question is, in a crunch time, when we really needed it, they're disappointed. So I think there will be hard feelings. But the question is, there are other dimensions of the relationships which we cannot ignore also. There is the military and economic cooperation for counterbalancing China in the Indo-Pacific. There are, all kinds of business linkages between the two countries, a huge $150 billion of trade, and all those things are there. I don't think they're going to go away. But definitely this will leave a bad taste, because their narrow calculations, corporate and domestic political calculations we thought had been overcome with the rise of the return of the liberals. But it turns out that the liberalism itself is hollow and unable to really rise to the occasion insofar as global leadership leadership goes. So I think for us, the lesson is, we cannot just rely on the US for any of our strategic dilemmas, be it a public health crisis like the pandemic, or be it even counterbalancing China, or Afghanistan, or any other important consideration for us. We have to diversify, and I think Dr. Jaishankar and Prime Minister Modi are doing that. They have a strategy to look at other countries and to build a broader sets of coalitions or issue-based coalitions with which we can solve our dilemmas. Because frankly, like you said, the EU may come in handy right now because the US is being adamant on raw materials. Likewise, the EU, if it's got an Indo-Pacific tilt, that's good for us. We want to involve more players. I think our approach has always been multilateral and trying to form small groups, or plurilateral, as Dr. Jaishankar calls it. And I think we are on the right track. It's just that right now it's really pinching us. So US will remain. So US will remain a pillar of our foreign policy. But people will ask questions, and I think rightly so. And we have to diversify.
Yes. Last word to Ambassador K.C. Singh. People will ask questions. People will remember. Look at the pictures. That we are, as a news channel, running every single day. People dying of, lack of oxygen in hospitals. Vaccination centers are putting up, these posters saying that there are no vaccines anymore. Our senior citizens have not got their second dose of vaccine. India obviously is extremely upset with the US. What would the Modi government then do, Ambassador Singh, to try and have some sort of a negotiation with America and try and ensure that it is of some help in this hour of need?
Look, at the diplomatic level or official level, you can maintain a degree of equanimity and say, look, we can talk as civilized people. But once it plays into the popular discourse and the common man starts thinking of America a certain way, then the image of America is demonized. And they have to understand this at this point, that they may have a point of view. But you take Pfizer, for instance, take Pfizer vaccine. Its components are not just coming from America. They almost 19 countries involved in giving the different components. So if you disrupt the supply chains, sooner or later it'll hit the Americans. Any vaccine takes 2 months to 4 months to really produce once the raw material arrives. And I think this needs to be explained. There's been a gap somewhere. We've not managed to get across to the Americans or to explain to them, probably because the second wave has caught us unprepared, has hit us very suddenly. I don't think our diplomats and the others were ready with their answers to go to the Americans, because everyone's been taken by surprise.
Yes. We then caught unawares. We were not expecting the second wave, because remember, at the end of the day, it was the government of India that had, in fact, in the month of January, said that things are in control. India has flattened the curve. So are we then really in the wrong for depending on the US? Were we then unprepared? And it's unfair right now, maybe, of us to expect too much from the US. They're being practical about it, for all you know. Thank you, Ambassador K.C. Singh, for joining us with your perspective. I'm also going to thank Dr. Sundar Chaulia for your perspective on that important story.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.